Welcome to the Newfoundland Lanes. I'm your host, Michael Winsor, joined as always, my co-host, Cory Babstock. Today, we're excited to welcome special guest, Shawna Prince, owner of Sei Whales Adventures. They join us today about whales in Newfoundland and Labrador, including their incredible migration from the Caribbean and what makes these majestic visitors so special each summer. We'll also dive into their work and their experiences on the water. Shawna, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Whales is number one in my thing of the photograph, so excited to see where this kind of leads. So I guess first, can you just tell us how you kind of started with Sei Whale Adventures and the company you started here in Trinity?
Sure. Chris and I were both working for another whale watching company, and when they decided to retire, we started Sei Whales. But it was sort of, we had always thought that starting our own whale watching company would be a retirement project, and we started it when we were in our 30s. So it's been a wonderful journey, lots of fun. And, we've eventually got to the point where we're no longer really working our day jobs. We were migrating back and forth between Alberta and here, and we're not doing that anymore.
How good is that?
We're just here doing this. Yeah, I know.
And how many years have you been operating now with Sei Whales?
We started in 2009. Yeah, so we're getting up there. Every day I stand on the side of the boat and say, this is my whatever season it is on the water here in Trinity. And then I'm I kind of choke on that because it's not possible. I'm only that old.
Oh, yeah.
So my first summer here was in 1999. So I've been on the water here for a long time.
Yeah. I did quite a few boat tours over the years with you guys, and yeah, it's magical. Still, one of my favorite pictures is the one with the humpback at sunset.
Yeah, that breeds.
Yeah,
You want to know, right?
Yeah.
And it's on the front of your
I want a few
boat.
words to that one, actually.
And that's so
It's in the book.
yeah. Pretty cool. That was a good night.
Well, the whales, well, we're all excited about whales here for sure, but they're just such amazing. Like when they come around the boat and you turn the engine off and they're trying to just be more curious, it's just magic.
And they feel safe. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I understand that
We've been working on photo identification research since before we started Sei Whales. So we have a pretty big data set, and some of it's really never been touched, and other stuff has been worked on or shared with other organizations for many, many years. So yeah, I'm doing a little bit of writing right now and hoping to get something.
those scientific papers, are they used for in university or is people you're working with down south?
The one I'm working on now is just for us, and it will go to scientific journals. Some of the other papers that we've had published have all been in conjunction with, in cooperation with other research organizations, whether they are about the breeding and calving grounds, whether they are about affinity for feeding grounds. We've had a couple of really unusual and unexpected matches of whales in sort of far-flung areas, so those often will have a paper written about them. There's always things happening and developing and changing, and we're always finding new things or discovering unexpected behaviors, I guess I should say, with these animals. So the problem is that we write the rules and they can't read. So they don't know what we think the rules should be and continue to do whaley things for whatever reason they're doing things, which then sometimes changes our expectation about what they should be doing.
Just on that point you were saying about whales that you see locally show up in far-flung areas, can you give us an example of that? Like where one popped up that was what?
Sure. I'm terrible with dates, so forgive me, but a few years back, we had a match to the Azores, which was unexpected at the time, the furthest eastern traveling Western North Atlantic humpback at that time. The next summer, we had notification that we had one that was off Franz Josef Land, Russia, which absolutely smashed that record. So that was pretty amazing. And then in recent times, we've had another one that was a very unexpected match that I can't talk about just yet because the publication is in press, but that one we'll be talking about real soon here.
Just as a teaser, did it further away than the Russian one?
Yes, and in a different direction.
Look forward to that.
Yeah.
So the other thing is how do you find out when it comes to identifying these whales?
How do we find out when they've been
in
random places?
Yeah, you don't put trackers on them.
Sure. So humpback whales are pretty easy because they swim around with license plates attached to them. photo identification is primarily how those kinds of things are being discovered. With humpback whales have very distinct tails. The black and white pattern stays pretty consistent throughout their lifetime once they're past their juvenile stage, because it does change as their calves. But then the trailing edge of their tail is sort of serrated like a steak knife and has different curvatures and different marks and different bumps in there. And that is consistent throughout their entire life cycle. So if you get a picture of a calf, while the black and white pattern hasn't usually stabilized yet, that trailing edge will always be the same. So sometimes it's as simple as sort of like trying to overlay them or put them side by side and see, like, does that big bump that sticks up match this big bump that sticks up, and those kinds of things. Also, sometimes if a tail becomes really damaged through an entanglement or an attack from an orca or whatever, then it's simple for us to be able to match, because, typically the details on one side are left, hopefully, unscathed, and so it makes it a little bit easier to manage.
You're primarily working with humpbacks, or are you looking at a variety of species, or?
We're looking at a variety of species. So right now we have photo ID work happening with orcas, with sperm whales, with humpback whales. We have a very large fin whale data set that I haven't even begun to do anything with, that dates back to the mid to early 90s. So there's a fair amount happening across ocean basins, species,
Right.
but in different regions. So we have shared data, but never done anything ourselves with those kinds of things before. So pretty much anything we can photograph out there becomes helpful to someone if they're doing the right research and asking, questions that we can help with. So we're happy to share, and certainly do. So the North Atlantic Humpback Whale Catalog is housed at the College of the Atlantic with Allied Whale in New England, and we share our data with them. And up until the Happywhale days, they were the only way really to get things matched. They are currently working on a paper about affinity to certain feeding grounds and how that's maybe changing and evolving as things get warmer. So we are actually currently sharing and packaging data to send to them. So that's something that I'm working on right now, just to get them as current as possible with our data set, so they can make, the most recent observations of what kinds of changes we're seeing, because even in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, things have changed significantly. And then we do share our humpback whales with Happywhale as well. So there's matches happening all the time that way. So a little bit of AI matching happening there. So it makes it much simpler than it used to be when it was, flicking through the 1,500 whales that are in our catalog. It's really hard on your eyes after a while, just trying to match those, as you can imagine. I mean, I know you guys do a lot of photo editing, so I'm sure you've flicked through a few pictures in your lifetime, trying to, keep your eyes. I do now do a 2-screen system, and that has helped so much. But, scrolling through and trying to remember after you've seen like the first 1,000 whales and like, wait, did that one have that? And then you have to keep flicking back and forth. And so it can be really hard on your head, really hard on your eyes after a while, but it's so worth it.
So the photographs that you photograph, is that more of like Chris gets, or do you go out on certain occasions looking for new whales to photograph, or from guests, or?
Primarily Chris is
pictures?
we do have contributions from other photographers sometimes as well. Particularly sometimes on the boat, if it's someone that maybe where he's at on the boat, the angle is a little bit off, but if they were closer to the front or further to the back than he is, sometimes bad lighting conditions, for example, which I'm sure you guys can recognize. If I can just get a better angle, I can see the trailing edge, or I can see sort of a characteristic feature, then it makes it much easier for me. So sometimes we're looking for photos from other photographers as well. We used to do that a lot more at the beginning of doing our catalog. Now it's so easy for people to submit their own photos to Happywhale and get matches back fairly quickly that it's not as important. But sometimes for me, if it's one that we're super interested in, or something that's, for example, I get requests from the breeding grounds all the time to have dorsal fin and fluke shots. So they're flippers, because they are not in deep enough water very often to bring their tail.
Interesting.
And even when they get shots of them, it's through the water. So unless the tail has a very high contrast and some very distinct markings, it's difficult to do tail matches. So we've been doing a lot more of, I think it's this whale, but do you have sort of like the supporting evidence to back that up? So do you have a dorsal fin shot from left or right? Do you have a flipper shot? If it was, waving at flippers around or whatever. So there's a lot more of that happening now, as we have more and more people on the breeding and calving grounds asking those questions.
Cool. And when it comes to Happywhale, what exactly is that? I know you
So
mentioned a couple
Happywhale
times.
is an AI matching tool. It's set up right now for a couple of different species. I believe it's set up now for sperm whales and humpbacks. The sperm whale data set is fairly new, so it's not making as many matches as the humpback one does. And they're working on algorithms for others, but it's basically looking at, it's like facial recognition software for whale
Awesome.
tails. Yeah.
Who operates that?
So that is Ted Cheeseman. I believe it was his PhD thesis, actually. And so he continues to operate Happywhale along with a bigger team now because they're getting so much data sent in.
Okay, because I know there was the provincial government. They got a thing going on too where they're trying to match up whales from
Yeah. So Hello
different
Humpback
areas.
actually uses Happywhale in the back end.
Hello, humpback. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just still trying to match them up there.
Yeah.
Same database, though. Like they use the.
Hello Humpback. Yeah. It's running Happywhale.
Well, you mentioned the sperm whales.
Cool.
I didn't even know we had sperm whales in our water. And it's been a big treat for me the last couple of years that we've had opportunity to go out and photograph them and spend some time with them. I know you guys spend a lot more time with them operating ahead of where you operate.
Yeah.
Are there more? Are they new? Is it like, can you tell us a little bit about sperm whales and their habitat and what makes them so interesting?
Sure.
Take a tour through this land's incredible vistas, wildlife, and your own creativity with an immersive guided photography tour. Get that perfect shot. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your tour today.
Yeah. So our sightings of sperm whales go back to 2003. So they're not new in this area. And they certainly also appear in the whaling records. Not a lot of them in the whaling records, but there are a few. I also think that probably at that time, more of the effort was focused closer to shore, and they tend to be out in deeper water. So that's probably why when they were doing just fine getting whales that were closer to shore, they didn't need to go out and get those guys. Certainly in the rest of the world, that was not the case, and they were very, very heavily hunted. So I think what we're seeing now is an increase in those numbers just as a result of there not being, the whaling activity in other areas of the world. These guys are really world travelers. The ones we have are a bachelor pod. They are all males, sometimes subadult and sometimes, older for sure. We have had some that have been coming for a very, very long time and have seen them on both sides of the bay. We have others that we only see in one location or the other. It's pretty interesting. Some summers we've had up to 15 individuals in the trench, and other summers, just a couple. It really just depends on what's happening. Last year they left a little bit earlier. We feel that might have been as a result of the wildfires and smoke on the Bonavista Bay side. It was very smoky, and I know there have been papers written about dolphins and some other species who have had sort of adverse effects as a result of that, but these guys can leave if it gets gross.
They're breathing the
Yeah,
same air we
yeah.
breathe, and God knows it was difficult for us. So
Yes,
that's
exactly.
an excellent point.
So, it's anybody's guess why they left, but my expectation is, it was much earlier than usual for them to leave, and that's what was happening at that time. So that's my best guess.
Just in the Bonavista side there, is that the only place where you see the sperm whales mostly?
No, so we saw them for years on the Trinity Bay side. Still
Okay.
occasionally spotted on the Trinity Bay side. And then we see them on the Bonavista Bay side as well. So more on the Bonavista Bay side now, although we have seen in more recent times sperm whales on this side as well.
And I know about it with Chris a few times, and he puts the sound recording thing device in the water.
A
I
hydrophone.
hear all the clicks.
Mhm.
The hydrophone there, that's pretty cool that is.
So we listen to the clicks that we're listening to primarily are for hunting. So they're echolocation clicks. And they do not make those sounds when they're on the surface. So if it's silent, they're either not there or they're on top. If there's lots of noise and they're down hunting, and we just listen to when it's quiet again, and then we know to keep an eye out for them on the surface.
So are they after squid?
Yes. That's their primary food source.
That's all they eat?
They're opportunistic feeders, so they can feed on lots of other things, like flatfish, and they can feed on schooling fish as well, apparently. But in our area, we believe that it's primarily squid that they're feeding on.
And you say they go in deep water. How deep is usually the water that they kind of hang out in, do you know?
We have really deep trenches that run up the center of Trinity Bay and Bonavista Bay. I'd have to get back to you on the total depth in that area. I want to say it's 1,000 feet there and deeper
It's
in
deep.
some areas.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's really deep.
You can't swim to the bottom.
No.
I really enjoyed shooting, photographing. I always got, as a photographer, we have to watch ourselves because we talk about shooting all the time.
I can get you arrested.
I found, like, doing photography with the sperm whales, they seem very docile on the water. Like, they very gently come over next to the boat. They're very curious. I want to say overly energetic. Now, that being said, I've not seen it, but I know Chris has, and he said that they do breach activity from time to time. Now, I've not seen that.
Yes.
That's something.
Spent a lot of time with them. Yeah, so we were 22 years into watching sperm whales when we saw our first breach, and then they did it all the time.
I think Chris got one, I think, last year of breaching sperm whale. I didn't even know that he actually breached at all.
It's so wild. I mean, humpbacks have those long flippers, so the breaches look really different. These guys just have like little tiny ones, so it's sort of like,
It looks like
it's interesting.
It looks like a
It's
train car coming, or a bus coming out of the water, because he had that, that's
Totally
flat
does,
face
yeah.
and no real fins. It's like, wow.
Yeah, it's very different, but it's super cool to see. And it just gives you a different perspective on an animal entirely when you get to see more of it than what we get to see on this. I would say that sperm whales are, I don't know if docile is the right way to describe it, but they tend to be, I mean, you have to think about it. They've been down for, on average, about 40 minutes by the time they get to the surface, and they've been holding their breath that whole time. So when they're on the top, they have to recharge their oxygen store before they can go back down. And so when they're on the surface like that, there's definitely a purpose to the behavior, where other whales, max like 10, 12 minutes or humpback, and then they're back up and they're breathing, and then they're back down again, and then they're back up, like it's so much. That behavior, though, it's important to recognize, is what made them so susceptible to whaling, because they couldn't do another deep dive right away and right away. And so as a result of that, then they were basically sitting ducks for whalers. And so it made it really easy to pick them off. And then when you have, group that together with the familial relationships and, all of the dynamics that exist there, then, it was super, super easy for them to be just cleaned out.
So when it comes to noticing the boats and stuff, I guess back in the day, the whales kind of scared of humans more than anything. But do you find now that where you're out there with the whales often, do they the whales recognize, say, hey, here comes Chris, let's go over and say hello? Or do you know if they kind of...
We certainly get different kinds of interactions with whales than other people do. So I'm not sure that they really know our boat. Chris would claim that he thinks they know the sound of our motors, but I think they relate to how the boat is being operated around them and whether they feel safe or whether they don't feel safe. And so if you're being very aggressive, you might get a really up close encounter one time. One time. And then they're like, this guy's not safe, and they're gone, right? So if you are patient, and if you are giving them their space, and if you give them the opportunity to interact when it's a good time, sometimes they're busy doing whale things, they're feeding really heavily, or whatever the case may be, and sometimes it's just not the right time. But if you provide a situation that feels safe for them, then they often will come and check you out just because it feels safe.
I know I've been out with most boat owners and tour companies around the island, different places. And like you said, there is some that is definitely more aggressive than others. And unfortunately, your guys, when I'm out with Chris and whatever, like I said, always been more respectful of the whales than anything else, which is awesome to see.
Thanks. We pride ourselves on that.
So we talked about the sperm whales, and we mentioned minkies in passing. Have you ever seen a whale on the water here that was a complete shock that this species was in our bay?
The first time we saw a sperm whale was definitely a shock. Had to come home and be like, is it a sperm whale? Like, it's definitely not. And, from a distance, sometimes from some angles, the dorsal fin can look a little bit like a humpback. And from some angles, the blow can look a little like a humpback. It's that bushy blow. But when you see it side on, it's definitely not. And the dive sequence is definitely not. So that was really shocking. We also had a blue whale a couple of years ago. So in our 2024 season, in September 2024. And that was, when you just accept that if you want to see a species, you're going to have to leave the country and go somewhere else. And then one's, oh, hey, I just showed up for a visit. Like it was. Yeah, right. But I mean, we had some really interesting conditions that summer. So it was warmer than usual in the water. There was a krill bloom, which we don't usually have. That is
Right.
what they like to eat. From the other side of Bonavista Vista Bay, sending me pictures being like, "What is this?" I'm like, handfuls of krill. I'm like, "That's blue whale food." So very cool. I think, you read what it's supposed to be like and how they differ from fin whales. And a couple of times we've had some sort of like false alarms with, are we seeing maybe some kind of hybrid or what is the situation? When you see a blue whale, there is absolutely nothing else that it is. Like it's completely different than all of the other whales. So very easy once you've seen one, like, oh yeah, that's what that was. And then we had a call from Richard Sears, who is our Canadian blue whale guy in the St. Lawrence, who was able to match one of the blue whales, and the other one was a new one for their catalog. So cool on both ends of it to have sort of a more complete life cycle on one that he hadn't seen for a little bit, and then to add another one to the catalog.
So they were traveling as a pair when they came? There was two of them?
They were traveling together. One was much larger than the other. No idea about, relative ages, because often we don't know these whales from the time that they are calves all the way through. So you can't say how old they are. And the second one, of course, no idea, because it hadn't been cataloged before, though maybe it's in someone else's catalog. I mean, these animals are really world travelers, and I can't stress that enough. Them doesn't. And so it's really important to share with other research organizations and figure out who has seen them and where have they been before. We've been sharing our sperm whale stuff with the Azores for decades and never had a match with them, but have had matches that other people have shared their data set with them that then it's matched to. So kind of interesting when you look at those as well.
So when it comes to whales, I know we talked about humpbacks and blue whales and sperm, but what are types of whales that we commonly see here, and what's our
Sure.
different
So
types?
fin whales are one of my favorites, just because I feel like this air of mystery that surrounds them. So they get to be about 60 to 90 feet. So, 2 to 3 times the length of the boat. Very often, I mean, in some summers, we see very large groups of them all traveling together, and others, sometimes they break up a little bit and are more solitary, or, a couple here and there together. Really amazing to see, just beautiful animals. It just gives you a really good idea about size and shape sometimes, especially if the water's really still and you can see sort of from the nose to the tail of the animal on a surface dive to get an idea. There's not a whole lot known about like critical habitat for fin whales still. So where humpbacks, we really have a bead on where they breed, where they calve, where they feed. And to protect a species, you have to understand those 3 pieces, as well as migratory pathways. And we really don't have all that data for fin whales. So a lot of these animals spend a great deal of their time. They spend a lot of their time in the very deep ocean, and research is very expensive. And so people simply are not, going out and looking.
Find the
for
fin whales, I've had a couple of experiences with them. The spout always blows my mind because it goes so high.
That big palm tree, and it really is easy to see them from a very long distance.
When it comes to photography, they are really cool, but you don't really see any tails or anything very often. Usually just a little spout that comes, or a big one that comes up, but that's,
and as photographers,
much
you
it.
can relate, in terms of identification, which is another reason why there hasn't been a lot of work. There is a fin whale catalog that exists out of College of the Atlantic as well, but photographing them is not easy, as you can imagine. And so they have this, if you get to see them from the right side, they have a white jaw on their right-hand side, and it goes sort of down their jaw and then up over their back. And so that's called the chevron, and that's what we get. That, shapes of dorsals, any scarring, those kinds of things, but that's really all we get. So they're not always broadcasting who they are. You have to have great light. And you guys have all been on the boat. I mean, that's, it's, well, you have to have this and that, and no matter what you have for gear or how fast you're shooting, sometimes you just
exactly
don't, right? And it's really difficult. Yeah. So they're tricky. Then also we get sei whales, which maybe you haven't heard of before, but they're similar in shape and size to a fin whale. They don't get as large. I think their max is about 60 to 70 feet. But their dive sequence is very different, and they do not have that white jaw. So what happens with them is when they come up, their blowhole and their dorsal fin are on the water at the same time, where a fin whale, like the blowhole comes up and it's a whole lot of back and a whole lot of back, and then the dorsal. And so sometimes in the early days when we started to see them here, and we don't see them a whole lot, maybe like once or twice a season, the boys would come in and tell me that they had seen a weird acting fin whale. Like, bring me the card. And almost always when it's just behaviorally, they're very different. They're a little bit more skittish. They're typically on their own. We had, Chris had responded to one that had beached a few years ago with Wayne Ledwell off one of the islands off Catalina. So they're around. It's just that they're a little more skittish. They often look like a fin whale, and people aren't paying a whole lot of attention to fin whales typically anyway. So sometimes they just get missed, I think. But so we have sei whales around. We have orcas also. We have a fairly large catalog of orcas. We have a friend, Arlene Irvin, who's been sort of correlating that data for a long time because it's a lot of work.
Learn how to capture the best images and develop your camera skills with workshops held in Newfoundland and Labrador's most inspiring natural landscapes. Newfoundland Photo Tours. Book your workshop today.
Is it the same, I guess, pod that comes every year, or is it different ones?
Multiple family groups, yeah. But we have matches sort of all up and down the Northeast coast. So like St. Pierre sees the same ones as the Avalon sees, as we see, as Twilling Gate sees. We have matches all the way up through to Labrador. We have actually also compared our catalog with a group out of University of Manitoba, and because they've been doing a lot of cataloging in the Arctic, and that's not that far as the whale swims. But no matches so far with theirs. So hard to say how far they are going, but certainly, up and down the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, we have matches for.
Have you seen any increase or decrease in frequency of orcas over the past few years, or?
I mean, we always would see them once or twice a season. Some years we see them a little bit more frequently and sometimes less. I would say there are more eyes on the water and more people with hand.
Good point.
So I think we're getting more data than we got before, right?
Right.
With more eyes
Makes
on
sense.
the water. And that's it. I mean, nobody will know the answer to that, I guess.
Orcas are really cool. I know Chris gets really excited about orcas. It's like, I think it's his favorite thing.
He's a little bit obsessed with them, and it's like the best day ever when he gets them. So yeah, we had a couple of really great days with them this past season. So yeah,
I've yet to see them on the water, so that's my bucket list.
Yeah.
If you could book them for me, let me know
Just
what
get
date.
out. We have a friend who went back. She's someone who whale watches with us, and she went back and says that I think it's July 14th. She's like, you always see them then. I'm booking July.
Noted.
I'm like,
So,
I haven't noticed patterns like that, but she claims that that's what she thinks, and that's what she's booking. So I'll let you know.
But saying that is, they do show up around that time, because I remember the first time I seen them was actually, I was out with Chris doing early sunrise, taking pictures of the birds and stuff.
Yeah.
So then I said, Chris, have you ever seen any orcas? Make sure you let me know. So I went to Bonavista Vista for puffins and stuff.
Yeah.
And Chris texted me and with a picture of an orca. I said, no way. So then, of course, I was fortunate enough to get out that day with the orcas.
Yeah.
And I keep track of it every year. I think it was the 5th one year, and then it was the 8th. The year after that was the 13th of July. But I think last year was a little bit different than first when it came around like Bonavista Vista area. Yeah. So I think it's around that time, beginning of July, during the 5th to the 14th or whatever, I think.
We have them a lot in the fall. Again, we try to make rules. We're humans, and our little brains like to we like to put things in categories, right? So they're doing whale things for whatever reason. Whales are doing things, and we don't think like whales, so it's really hard to say for sure.
So I know I saw, I guess, on social media that you were down in Turks and Caicos, I believe, with the whales down there as well, the humpbacks.
We were, yeah. We had a great time.
That must have been exciting.
It's really interesting when you read in books that they go there, but it's an entirely different thing when you see it with your own eyes, right? So Chris and I have been to the Silverbank before, which is just off the coast of the Dominican Republic. But we've been doing a lot of collaborating with the group in Turks and Caicos, and so thought it would be fun to get there. So yeah, we were there this year.
So did you get in the water as well?
Yeah, it's pretty,
Were calves
pretty cool.
being born now? Like when you were down there, was that prime calving season?
Yeah, so we were there sort of end of February, beginning of March. That's prime calving, and then breeding season. It's all happening at the same time. Station is about a year.
And
for sure.
When you say little babies,
the size of a truck.
Yeah. Size of my CRV or bigger. Right? Yeah.
So they're not exactly like itty bitties, and they certainly grow really quickly. So even watching videos of them from early in the season to later in the season, if they're lucky enough to see the same mom and calf pair, it's really crazy how fast they're growing.
That's so
Yeah.
cool, though.
Like, their milk is kind of rich, right? Like a lot of fat content, I believe. I
Yeah,
saw
it's
like
about the consistency of cottage cheese. So it's not really like we think of milk as being a liquid, and that's not really how it is. You have
so
to,
you're into
our milk is designed to grow brains first, right? So our babies need to be cognitively, developed first, where other animals like cow's milk, for example, is designed to develop muscle and bone really quickly so that they can run away from predators, right? And so for whales, they have to fatten up their babies and get them fit enough to make a migration to the feeding ground. And so that milk has to be really fat rich so that they can build a blubber store. I mean, they cannot have a baby up here and have it survive. When you think about those mamas are here feeding and building up enough fat stores while she's pregnant and growing a calf, but has to make that migration back down there to deliver the calf and then feed the calf and then up here to the feeding ground again. The
Yeah.
caloric demand on her body. I mean, it's really remarkable that they're able to do that. And so what you see is that the animals that leave later are typically the females because they're the ones, their success overall depends on building up that blubber store for as long as they're able to. Where the ones that leave earlier are the
Now,
males
are there
typically.
whales that hang out here all year
Yes.
round?
Yeah, so it's not unusual to have, particularly off Catalina on the Bonavista Vista Peninsula, they will have Christmas whales, they call them. So in December, it's just sort
Yeah.
of like a thing that happens that there will be humpbacks in that area. It's my expectation that those are females. We have also had a few that came back early or maybe didn't make the
Right.
migration at all. Chris was out hunting some birds a couple of years ago and had some really great shots of humpbacks with, looks like they're in Alaska with like the snow and the ice on the cliffs behind and these whales. So one of them was a female that had had a calf the previous year. So whether she had made the migration and came back already or whether she didn't leave in the first place remains to be seen. And the other one we were not able to identify. So really interesting when you start to look at, again, it's not the ones that are doing the normal things. It's the ones that are doing the abnormal things
Yeah.
that are the most interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a
sometimes.
discussion
Yeah.
with somebody concerning all wildlife, not just whales. It's like you're always looking for a behavior that's different. That's what
Yes.
makes it interesting because it's different, right? So,
Yeah. And you wonder why they're doing those things and if they made the migration, if they didn't. And photo ID work helps with that a lot in the
Right.
water in the winter here than there are in the summer. And so just nobody out there to see it is always a big question that I have.
that. So I know, like I said, you saw that in the Caribbean, and then they make their big long journey up to Newfoundland. Why is that?
So they don't really feed when they're there. And so they get hungry and they need to come back. And we host the all-you-can-eat capelin and herring buffet here. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. And so they're
A little
on
bit.
their way up, for the buffet. So we are starting to see, we have colleagues in Bermuda who are starting to see a lot of whales. So what tends to happen there is that they seem to go to Bermuda and sort of group up and then travel in larger groups from there. So we have seen some footage in the last week off South Caicos Island where there is a fairly large group appears to be leaving there, all grouped up. And then they will go to Bermuda or just off the coast of Bermuda and group up and swim in larger groups. It's interesting. It's a safety and numbers thing, particularly there are calves. So they had a humpback calf that has some really big rake marks on its pectoral fin, looking like it was in the mouth of an orca because the scratches are on the side and on the bottom side, really well healed. But, you have to look at why did that happen? And they've never actually seen an orca attack on the breeding and calving grounds. And we know that a lot of them do have scarring, but I guess the assumption was always that it happened on the migration. And that apparently is not the case. They're still on the breeding and calving grounds. So where were those orcas? When did that attack happen? What's the story there? And we'll never know, of course. But some really interesting things, again, the anomalies. So where are these orcas? And we know that they're really they're very well distributed across the globe. So it's not inconceivable to think that they are there, but they also have crazy large home ranges like all other whales do. So, you know, interesting. And what happened to get that little calf out of that mouth and to not have more damage done to the pectoral fin? And, there are always more questions than there are answers, it seems.
Maybe mama came along and got fight them away.
I wouldn't want to be messing with an adult humpback, 50 feet, 50 tons, that sharp serrated trailing edge on the tail and, the flippers as well. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be fighting a mama, that's for sure.
You just think of the power that like they breach and stuff. As like for that, all that weight to come out of there, that power in that tail, it's incredible.
I've been in the water before when calves have breached and it's like 2.5 tail strokes. Like you don't even have time to process like, oh, they're going to breach and they're out of the water. Like it's really remarkable.
Yeah, I was watching,
even when they're
watching some footage on YouTube just the other day of a diver who was underwater with humpbacks when they were breaching. And I was saying, man, it doesn't look like they're even putting any effort into it. Like you're right. It was just like a couple of little, right? And it was so cool how they propelled themselves with so little effort, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, I think because we're terrestrial animals, we tend to be like, it's really hard for me, so it must be really hard for them. But their tail is pushing their entire body weight like all day. So really, to push it in a different direction apparently is not that hard. Right?
Amazing, though.
It's interesting.
So that kind of leads to one of the most commonly asked questions ever when we're on tours. Why do they breach? Any idea or insight on that?
I always tell people it's sort of like, why do people scratch their heads? Is it because they're itchy, or is it because they're thinking, or is it because, like there's all kinds of different reasons. So I think there's no one reason. I think it's a complex behavior that happens for a variety of different reasons. So in some areas, they're breaching to knock parasites off them or sloughing off skin, and it might be itchy. And so, slapping down on the water there really helps. We have historically more breaches on days when it's windy. And why is that? So is it that it's softer to hit the water when it's broken up more by waves? Is it because they like how the air feels on their skin? Like we like how the water feels on ours? Maybe they can't hear each other as well. They need to get out of the water, for whatever reason to see. I mean, who knows, right? And it may be, yes, all of the above.
We tell our guests that, like if we're getting ready to go out on a Zodiac tour and the winds, the water's a little choppy. It's still safe, but choppy.
Yeah.
And we'll say, well, actually, in our experience, this is the best time to go out. It seems like this is when we're getting the most activity, right? And it proves out most times we go out there and we do see more activity when the wind is up.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Most of the pictures you see of breaches are not when it's rough because it's like hard on your camera. Now we have cameras that are out in the water. So, I feel like we should be field testing things. They're like, these new ones are water resistant. I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. Let's test that out and see, our lenses tend to end up being almost like sacrificial because our camera lives out there. It only comes in at the end of the day, right? And so we're not buying nice lenses. We're buying like middle of the road because any given day it's taking the brunt of the spray and it's tough. It's tough on electronics automated,
the upside
right?
is you can take thousands of photos now.
Well, that's just it. In my day when I started working on the boat, we were only shooting film. I'd have people who would shoot like 2 rolls of film before they left the harbor because it's so pretty here. Ain't anything yet.
Yeah.
So they only used to film in like a dry box on the boat, take out and reload film is not really advised either. So
it's funny you talk about taking so many photos at the beginning. Like every season, I do the same thing. Every season, the first time I go out, every little fin I see, every little thing, take pictures. And when you get to the end of the season, you're waiting for that big breach or that big whale.
Right. You're a little bit more show. Yeah. But at least you're not paying to have it all developed. My first summer, I remember being like, see that shot of the water with the lighthouse behind it? Like right before I took this picture, there was a whale there.
Different world.
Because the first cameras or even like the first digital cameras, the delay, like you had to push the button before they didn't know any of what you were getting. You just went with it, right? It's so much easier now when it's like instant, where before it was not like that at all. And then you didn't know. Now you can check and make sure, especially with ID stuff. I got right where like before it was like 3 weeks later when you get your pictures back that have been developed, you're like, oh, I didn't get that. We can't go back. Oh, well. Yeah. So it's really changed things for sure.
So for this upcoming season, any plans for like when it comes to your research or anything like that? Hopefully a big whale season, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, hoping we have calm season planned for whales, that's for sure. In the more immediate future, we're hoping maybe we'll have an iceberg show up. That would be really nice.
Fingers crossed.
Always good to start the season off. I know, right? Always good. Map is looking. I think there's a little bit more data, better data coming in. And so, where there were only a few before, it looks like we have more. We have the pack ice sitting not that far offshore right now. And often when the pack ice comes, it brings icebergs. So that's like a good sign for those kinds of things. Though in my business, it also means I can't leave a boat in the water ever because you really can't trust pack ice, right? So I remember one season we didn't even have our floating dock in the water yet because we were worried about ice damage. And the whole point of having a floating dock is that you don't have to deal with ice damage. Chris had the Zodiac over here in the bottom of the harbor at somebody's wharf and was hauling it up every night because where we can pull the boat up is on the other side of town. You'd have to literally go through the pack ice to get it out if it came in. And it was like July 3rd. And I said, gosh, like, do you really have to haul the boat up? He was like, yeah, I really do. And so we had a little bit of a discussion about it. And he hauled. And I had to leave to take the kids to an activity in the morning. And when I got up, there was an iceberg that had just like made its way in the harbor and pressed itself against that dock right where our boat had been put up. I thought, you go ahead and haul the boat up. Anytime you think you need to haul it up, you just do that anytime. Because that would have been catastrophic to have an iceberg jam our boat between, it and the wharf. Like I can't even, sometimes when the pack ice comes in, it brings things with it, but it also brings some, it's hard for the fishermen for sure. They lose gear all the time. So crab pots and lobster pots and the ice sometimes will take it places and dump it. And so all of it has registration numbers on it. So I know there's Facebook groups that are, I have the following fleet of crab pots that belong to someone with this number on it, the other side of it. So fortunately, social media has been great for those kinds of things, but it is a little dangerous in terms of leaving stuff in the water overnight. So we always have to be really vigilant until that comes and goes. It's silent. It's not like it announces itself or it's got an engine on it or whatever. I mean, you look out and it's in, and then you look out and it's gone again. And
amazing
it's
how fast it moves too. Eh?
It really is, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, if it does come all the way in or if it just kind of drifts past. So that'll be interesting. We are hoping to be able to start to do some length measurements of sperm whales this year. There's a couple different methods we can do, so we're going to play around with that just to get an idea about how big some of these boys are. So yeah, that'll be something fun to sort of play with. And sometimes the sperm whales come really early in the season, so we'll get to do a little bit of that before it gets crazy busy. And yeah, just hoping to get some papers written and some data sorted out. We'll be able to, I did a lot of work over the winter, so we should be able to be matching our whales almost in real time, though it does get really busy when we start to have lots of them to get all that done. So that should make things a little simpler. So always just trying to work smarter, not harder, and, getting things sort of caught up because we had so many years of data backlogged that maybe we'll get to delve into some of those sets that haven't been looked at before. So yeah.
So when are you planning on starting, or do you have a date yet, or just kind of see how the ice conditions go?
Officially, every season we operate May 15th to October 15th. And then operating outside of that just really depends on, what's happening weather-wise. But when, if the weather cooperates and, if we end up with whales or icebergs really early, then we can speed things up and get it out sooner. But officially May 15th to October 15th every single year. And then sometimes it gets sort of edged out on either end of that, depending on what's happening weather-wise, whale-wise, etc.
Cool. And where can people find you or learn more about Sei Whales if they're more interested in find out more?
So our website is seiofwhales.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. We post our daily sightings once we're on the water on Facebook and Instagram and on our Google business listings. So you can see sort of what's happening coming up to your trip. And also, if you made a booking for a different time and you're concerned about whether or not you see things, you can go back in our historical data and see what we've been seeing at that time of the year on those same days.
Good question on that. What you're seeing, we talked a lot about whales and icebergs, obviously, because that's the big ticket items. But I always say there's no such thing as a wasted trip on the water. Even if you're not seeing whales or icebergs, I mean, you probably assume you're going to see lots of seabirds, eagles, landscape, seascape, just, other things as well on the trips. And I think it's important that people know that, because I think people get tied up a lot with the, the icebergs and the whale part, and rightfully so. I mean, that's what I get excited about.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I've never, ever had a bad trip or a trip underwater.
I think if you're visiting Newfoundland, you must see it from the water.
Same.
I think it gives you a completely different perspective. You know, even late into the fall, we get some really interesting things happening. So in terms of tuna and dolphins, some of the largest groups of dolphins that we get are even into like November. We have sea turtles that come late in the season. So that's always really interesting. Again, sharing that data with people who are able to do something with it. I mean, we don't have enough sightings to really do anything ourselves, but it's certainly very exciting for people who are researching leatherback sea turtles. So it's always interesting when you get out there. We also do rock the boat geology tours. So we are in the Discovery UNESCO Global Geopark. And so we have tours that we do from both sides of the peninsula, specifically speaking to geological features and geosites that we encounter along the way, and also how that impacts the biology here as well. So I think people think that the rocks or the geology is separate from the biology, and that's simply not the case. They're not separate systems, and they certainly impact each other. So certainly doing that tour, and then later on when there maybe is not as much happening out there whale-wise or iceberg-wise, to be able to do a little bit more of that interpretation as well. And we certainly do it daily on the trips, but you know, when there's a whale breaching in the background or flipper slapping or something, it's sometimes harder to get through that.
Here.
Yeah, you keep getting it, you know, photobombed by other things. And so, so it's nice to have a variety of things that you can share with people, and even kind of delved into some of the family history as well. Chris's family has some, well, definitely lots of fishing heritage, but some whaling heritage as well. So maybe looking at developing something around that whole package. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's lots to see. So people just need to get out on the water.
Absolutely. Thanks a million for joining us. It was a pleasure learning more about whales. My favorite thing to photograph and see for sure. But yeah, so thanks for joining us. And as we always say here in Newfoundland, keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart in Newfoundland.